welcome back to another ASJ Doctor Who video. As promised in the last part of this series, where I rated every 13th Doctor story, I think we're now going to make this a series and we're going to go to the 12th Doctor now, so we're going to rank his stories. We're going to eventually move backwards through all the Doctors till we get to the first Doctor. Simple as, really. So, let's go. So here we are, same as last time, 12th Doctor episodes tier list maker. One thing I've done slightly differently to the 13th Doctor section is, with 13 I deleted the category that said not canon, but this time I've replaced it with a category called Atrocious, which is meant for one episode and one episode only. But anyway, let's rate every episode of the 12th Doctor, my favourite modern era Doctor. These are all sort of out of order, rather annoyingly again, but I'm going to do them in broadcast order, which means we are starting with Deep Breath, which I think was a fantastic introduction for a Doctor. Definitely felt really fresh and like a whole new take on the show. I just love the way that the Doctor is slowly introduced to us as well. After that we had... oh yeah, Into the Dalek. I'm going to say Into the Dalek was okay, to be honest. I didn't find it very memorable, in all honesty. I mean, once you get past the whole novel idea of shrinking the Doctor and the companions down and put them inside a Dalek's casing, yeah, that's an interesting idea, but I just didn't find it all that memorable, to be honest. And in terms of Dalek stories, the Daleks just feel like generic shooty robots at this point. I mean, there's not much about it that I find all that interesting besides the core premise, to be honest. Robot of Sherwood, I'm going to say, is okay as well. As far as historicals go, this is one of the weaker ones. I like that Ben Miller played the villain in it, who's, of course, James Lester in Primeval. If anybody remembers that show, you're awesome. Besides that, I just found it to be kind of just generic robots doing bad thing in historical setting, and it wasn't all that great, to be completely honest. On the other hand, Listen, I think, is one of the greatest. I know it's a pretty polarising episode overall, but I found it really amazing, and I just love thinking about what the fuck those hiding creatures were. Like, especially the whole sequence where they're on Orson Pink's shuttle at the end of the universe, end of time, whatever. That whole sequence, it gets me thinking every time, and I love the atmosphere of it as well. There's just something about Listen I think is truly phenomenal. Time Heist, I'm going to put that in good. I think that was a pretty good episode, a really fun episode as well, with a really cool twist at the end. I think it's a really solid idea for an episode. What was the next episode? Oh, The Caretaker. Yeah, The Caretaker, I'm going to put that in good as well. I think that's another really solid little episode. Maybe kind of a bit of a generic evil robot goes on rampage kind of story, but I think it's done well enough. Next up, we've got Kill the Moon. Kill the Moon, I'm going to put it in okay. Yeah, I've never really felt like it was that much of an enjoyable episode. It feels like the only real notable thing from it was really to try and make some kind of tension and conflict happen between 12 and Clara, which leads to a much better episode the following week, which is, of course, Mummy on the Orient Express, which I'm going to put in... I'm going to put it in fantastic. I kind of think it's a bit overrated for the most part, but I think it's still a cracking good story. I've definitely warmed to it more upon rewatches over the years, definitely. Next up we have Flatline, which I'm going to put as one of the greatest alongside Listen. I think it's another incredibly inventive episode, one of the coolest concepts Doctor Who's ever done. Aliens from a universe with only 2 dimensions coming into a 3-dimensional universe. That is a really inspired episode idea, and I freaking love them for doing it. Next up we have In the Forest of the Night. If you know anything about me, if you've seen some of my other videos, you may know that In the Forest of the Night is what I consider to be the epitome of this franchise. I think it's the worst Doctor Who story ever made, including expanded media. I just generally think it is the worst thing ever made to have the words Doctor Who printed on it, and it's going in Atrocious. And it's the only episode to go in this category that I made specifically for this episode. Moving on now to Dark Water, if I can find it somewhere. Dark Water, I'm going to put in good, and obviously Death in Heaven is the second part of that story, so I'm going to put that in good as well. Generally, I'd say pretty solid finale, with a few flaws here and there, I think, but still, I don't think they detract too much from the story to make it pretty enjoyable. Last Christmas, I think it's actually one of the better Christmas specials, to be honest. Maybe not one of the best, but I think it still had some really good things going for it. Last Christmas, I'm going to say is okay. Next up we have Series 9. We're beginning now with The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. I'm gonna put them together in one go because they're like a two-parter. I thought these episodes were okay when they first came out, but upon a more recent viewing, I actually don't really like The Magician's Apprentice / Witch's Familiar. I think there's a lot of wasted potential there, but last time I watched them, there was just something about it that really irked me, and I couldn't quite place what it was. I'm gonna put them in bad, I'm sorry, I don't think they were really good episodes. In terms of a series opener as well, I think, yeah, there's a big scale there due to there being lots of Daleks, but that's about it. I don't know, there's just something about Magician's Apprentice / Witch's Familiar that I can't get into, and I think it could have been a lot more. So carrying on with Series 9 now, we have Under the Lake and Before the Flood, and I think those are some pretty strong episodes, those two, that little two-parter there. So I'm going to put both of those in, I'm going to put them in fantastic. Great little timey-wimey plot, really solid episode. Plus, I think the Fisher King is one of the coolest monster designs that the modern show's ever come up with. Okay, this is also technically a two-parter, I think, but I'm going to class these next two episodes individually, even though they are sort of interconnected. So The Girl Who Died is the next one, and I'm going to put that in... I'm going to put it in okay because I don't find it all that memorable. The Maya as a villain concept is kind of interesting, but apart from that I don't really care for it much. It's another really forgettable pseudo-historical episode. After that, The Woman Who Lived, sort of a continuation. I'm going to put that in bad. I don't even really remember much about what happened in it. As far as I know, it's just the Doctor on his own. He just meets up with Ashilda again after she's lived through like 500 years of human history. I don't know, this random lion human person turns up and tries to take over the Earth, and that plan gets stopped after about 3 minutes. And I have no fucking clue what happened in that episode. It's just forgettable. After that, we have the Zygon two-parter, the Zygon Invasion / the Zygon Inversion, which I think was pretty decent. I think I'm going to put that two-parter in fantastic. I think that was a great little two-part story there. Nice anti-war message. After that, it was Sleep No More. I'm going to put this episode in okay, actually. I actually kind of like Sleep No More, but it's a bit flawed and maybe doesn't stand out all that well besides the whole, it's Doctor Who as a found footage episode. The actual plot itself is a little bit bare bones in a lot of places, to be honest. I like the atmosphere of it at least, and, there's some cool bits in there. Next up we have Face the Raven. I'm going to put it in good just because Clara's death is really well done, and then they ruin it 2 weeks later, but for now, at least, she's dead. That's really well done. I like the idea of Trap Street, it's quite cool. I don't think it was one of the biggest standouts in terms of concept, but I think it does its job really well. Pretty strong, I think. Then we have Heaven Sent, which obviously has to go up as one of the greatest. I mean, do I even need to say anything else? It's motherfucking Heaven Sent. It's like one of the greatest pieces of TV ever made. Which is a shame, because afterwards Hellbent comes along. I'm going to say Hellbent is okay. I like the idea of the Doctor being so mad and just going back to Gallifrey to try and get answers or like just get revenge overall. Even if the last episode was kind of about him coping with his grief and coming to terms with it, kind of ruins it in that regard, I don't know. To be honest, I think Hellbent is a pretty decent episode up until the point where the Doctor decides to rescue Clara. Not the best episode, but not the worst. After that we have, I think it was Husbands of River Song next, wasn't it? I'm actually going to put that in good. I think it's probably one of my favourite of the Christmas specials, and considering I dislike most Christmas specials for the most part, that's saying something. I just think it was a really sweet little episode. After that we have another Christmas special, which was the Return of Dr. Mysterio, which was just bad. It was just plain bad, I'm sorry. The episode came out in 2016 when there was this like massive resurgence of superhero popularity. Like there was a superhero fucking craze in 2016 for some reason. And I feel like this episode was made just to pander to that. Like superhero as a genre I think is such a piece of shit, to be completely honest. And then for Doctor Who to just give in to that, and for the only episode of that entire year to be a crappy, soppy Christmas special about the Doctor meeting a fucking generic superhero, that really just capped off one of the worst years in recent times. Like 2016 was an awful year. Probably would be the worst Capaldi episode if it wasn't for In the Forest of the Night. Anyway, moving on to Series 10, which I think is a brilliant series, with the pilot, which I think is an okay opener, nothing too special. Introducing Bill, I think, is its strongest point. Smile, I think, is a good episode, quite interesting. It's kind of just a rehash of the basic premise of the Happiness Patrol from the McCoy era, but I think they do enough differently with it in terms of setting and villains and just the way the episode goes, you know, that I think it stands up pretty well on its own. Thin Ice I'm also going to put in good. I think that's a good little episode. Not particularly stand out as such, but it's a nice little historical. Knock Knock I'm going to put in okay. I didn't think it was all that memorable, to be honest. I mean, I can see what they were going for with it, but I think it kind of misses the mark a little bit. Next up we have Oxygen. I'm going to put that episode in good as well. I think pretty solid episode, but I think it could have been a little bit more. I think there's just something missing from that episode, you know? Not much, but just something. Then we have Extremis, which I think is actually one of the greatest. I'm not quite sure what the general opinion from the fandom is on this episode, but I think it's great as a concept. I love how it's like a bit of a darker tone, even kind of nihilistic in places, which I think is actually like brilliant. I just really love Extremis. Pyramid at the End of the World, I'm going to put that in good. I think there's a pretty decent follow-up to Extremis, given how this is part of a three-parter now in the middle of Series 10. I like the idea of the monks taking advantage of this, just, you know, this random accident that was due to end the world, and they just worm their way in and take over the planet, using that as an excuse to take us over. That's a cool idea, I like that. Lie of the Land. I think I'm going to put it in okay. It was decent, I think, but I don't know, it definitely felt like there was things out of place or things missing or things that didn't work in there that could have been tweaked to make it better. Next up was the Empress of Mars, which I'm going to put that in okay as well. It wasn't great. In terms of Ice Warrior stories, it's one of the weaker ones. Like, yeah, I don't know. It felt a little bit flat for the most part. The Eaters of Light, bad. One of the worst episodes. If I had to pick a top 3 least favourite 12th Doctor episodes, it would be Return of Dr. Mysterio, The Eaters of Light, and In the Forest of the Night. So yeah. World Enough in Time, one of the greatest. And the second episode in that two-parter, The Doctor Falls, the greatest. Yeah, bundling that two-parter together, I'm going to put both of them in the greatest. I think they were both brilliant stories. World Enough in Time is possibly one of the best depictions of the body horror side of the Cybermen they've ever done in the TV show, at least. I know they've gone a lot further than this in expanded media. And the follow-up to that is just a great final stand for the Doctor, kind of a tragic way for him to go out, but it's what the Doctor would do. And then we have Twice Upon a Time. Now, ignoring the rather botched up characterisation of the first Doctor, which I think they get kind of right in places, but also not right in some other places. Barring that, this is a really sweet little episode. No real conflict to it, it's a nice winding down episode to round off the Moffat era and 12's era overall, and I think it's just a really nice sweet little episode. So there you have my rating of every 12th Doctor episode. If you agree, then leave a like. Also leave a like if you enjoyed the video overall, and subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to leave your ratings for this era down below in the comments, and I'll be back with another video in about a week or so. Until then, see ya!